Hi everybody, David Cantor here, host of UUCC Zoom In Live. You know, I was thinking about when the show first started and came across this video promo for the very first episode. Check this out. Hi everybody, I'm David Cantor, your UUCC board treasurer. I'm here with Carol Gay, our new board president. So Carol, how'd the first month go?
It went pretty well. There's a lot of details to attend to, and things are a little crazy that we're in a pandemic. So it has me thinking about how we can get our congregation involved a little bit more together and what kinds of things we could do that people could meet together in different ways.
Seems like forever ago, right? Well, a lot's happened since then, and so I thought that now would be a good time to actually have Carol as a guest on the show and find out how she thinks things have been going. Are we like this? Or more like this? Yeah, it's kind of yucky, isn't it? So, join me on Monday, November 23rd, 8 to 9 p.m. for UUCC Zoom In Live with our special guest, Board President Carol Gay. Hope to see you then. Take care. Bye now.
For our Chalice Lighting this morning, I'd like to quote one of our sextons who said something very brilliant today while we were setting this up. Sean Peterson said, "Rise up like bread. Let us rise up to the injustice of the world. Let us rise up for love. Let us rise up for goodness." Hi, I'm the Reverend Joe Cherry, and I serve the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Cleveland. I'd like to welcome you to our annual Bread Communion, though this year, of course, it looks a little different than it has in the past. Instead of coming together this year, you'll be hearing stories about bread and family from our worship associates. You'll be hearing music, of course, from Mike Carney and the choir. I hope that what we'll offer you this day will be something that might be comforting to you, because none of us are going to be doing what we used to do. We're not going to be seeing the people we're used to seeing or eating the foods we're used to eating every year on Thanksgiving. So it's our hope that you'll take these stories with you. They'll offer you a little something to keep nearby during what might be an awkward week. So, welcome to our service.
We gather together in joyful thanksgiving, acclaiming creation.
Food, in the end, in our own tradition, is something holy. It's not about nutrients and calories. It's about sharing. It's about honesty. It's about identity.
It's been a tradition in our congregation every year to share bread communion, to come together and bring bread from home that we've baked, stories from our families. We've had to do other communions by distance, flower communion and water communion. We were able to share videos of those things happening. But bread is different. Bread is a visceral experience. You tear the bread to share with people. You open it up and you see all the air bubbles inside. And together, you taste it. You savor the flavors of the bread and the baker of the bread. This year, we can't do that. This year instead, the worship team is bringing you stories from the bread in our own lives. I wish you were here so we could share this bread. But we're staying apart for safety, so that in the future, there can be a bread communion where we can once again tear bread together.
Good morning. My heritage on my mother's side is Hungarian, and we didn't make bread. But the go-to pastry in my grandmother's house was what we called Belish, B-E-L-E-S. I found out later that in most other ethnicities, they're called kalachki. Maybe even in some other parts of Hungary, I don't know. And so on my grandmother's big metal kitchen table, she would roll out large piece of dough and cut it into strips and then cut those into squares and fill them with either a nut mixture, which you had to grind the nuts and mix with egg white and some other things, and you could fill them with the nut mixture or get the solo cans of apricot or maybe prune, but we never made prune. And then you fold it over on two sides. We only folded on two sides, not on four sides, and made like a little papoose. And sprinkled them with powdered sugar, and they were wonderful. I'm sure you're all familiar with them. You can buy them at Heinen's, but they weren't as good as they were when made by my grandmother and a few times by me. Not, you know, the kids always say, "Mom, when are you going to make Belish again?" But I haven't made them for a long time. So that's my story.
Well, good morning here on this Bread Communion Sunday and also the Sunday of the week of Thanksgiving. I hope all of you are preparing for a lovely holiday in a year that, of course, is full of all kinds of surprises and inconveniences. This was an occasion, of course, to think about the meaning of bread communion in a different kind of a way. Because obviously this is a strange year where this period we're supposed to be inviting people into our homes and having these connections and deep, moments of Thanksgiving have transformed into a year where we have to stay apart. So I've been thinking about memorable holidays in my own experience, and I was thinking about it with respect to bread, and the one that I sort of started drawing on was the holidays I spent in southern India. This was a trip I took that was definitely not a vacation. It was actually part of my seminary coursework. A requirement at the seminary I attended was that you do what was called a cross-cultural immersion, a confrontation with world cultures that reminded us our place in the world. We left that year on Christmas Eve, and we were there through like sort of the rest of January. I had done a great deal to prepare myself for this trip. This was not like a vacation travel. I had read about Indian politics and society, religion and culture, and all of that was extremely helpful, especially to build on as I was actually there to see things up close. But the thing that was really the total surprise for me was, without a doubt, the food. All the foods that I ate in India were like fireworks. Obviously, they are full of spices and chilies, but more than that, it's a level of intensity in those spices that is just like completely surprising if you've never been in this place before. Mind you, southern India in particular is the place where most of these things are grown and have been grown since time immemorial. So there were all kinds of new things to taste, and all of them were as profound as anything else I was experiencing in that new place. But I wasn't ready for the bread. And when I say bread, I mean things done with water and dough that were completely new and like completely transformative to me. The first day we were there was part of a New Year festival where I was introduced to idli, which are these like rice and legume flour dumplings that looked a little like UFOs. They were covered in this spice-filled sauce. Next it was these fried and grilled breads, these flatbreads like puri and chapati that were there to accompany all the other foods that we were eating. And then it was something completely unexpected. One day our group was getting ready for, a sort of a long day trip to a site, and our hosts had brought us bags full of what were called medu vada, the sort of snack for the trip that were these savory donuts made out of lentil flour. Now, I have a serious weakness for donuts, like regardless. Like I can put away way more than my fair share of donuts. But as I bit into these just snack treats in this little wax bag, it was a fireworks show. And it came from the fact that there were full unground spices in this dough, like a full peppercorn and a cumin and a fennel seed, and then like a cardamom seed. These things that are like literally just exploding in my face. Of course, I spent the rest of the trip learning more about India, understanding more about its religious groups, its cultural dimensions. All of that happened. It was all deeply formative. But, and this is why I think we can evolve our thinking about food during the holidays. The food there mattered to me in a way that was just profound. Because I've lost, let's say, most of the things I learned while I was there. In the sense that, like, I tried to learn the Tamil alphabet. I couldn't even begin to try to do that again. Even while I was there, I saw sites and went to places that have, like, totally gone out of my mind. But I learned a craving, like a real craving for that food and those tastes and those flavors that still remains with me. And that's a deep kind of learning that food can communicate to us. Not only did I learn that experience of that new culture, but I also learned how to unlearn my own expectations and my own limitations as far as that went. Because it wouldn't have occurred to me to try this way, or it wouldn't have had an occasion to taste the spice in this way in my previous life. Now, the reason that happened was because I was able to experience and internalize something that was shared with me from a place and a culture and a people that wasn't my own. It was a powerful lesson that we can all learn that our habits and our tastes and our experience and our preferences, these are not limitations so much as they're boundaries to be crossed so that we can grow into one another. And if there's a reason to give thanks this year for the comforts and the familiarity of home and family and the blessings of our familiar lives, there's just as much reason to give thanks for having our senses and our minds and our spirits opened up to the wide world. And that can come in all kinds of forms: music, art, architecture, friendship, spirituality, meetings with other people, friendships, all kinds of things. But for me, it was bread and donuts and dumplings.
You don't have to cook fancy or complicated masterpieces Just good food from fresh ingredients.
Each week we come together as a people. Together we share stories, love, aspirations. We also share our bounty in ways that express our religious Unitarian Universalist values. May this important ritual of sharing abundance remind us that making our world better is a task best shared.
Our meditation this morning is a meditation on bread making by Tanya Gibson. If there was one smell my son could bottle and then marinate in for the rest of his life, it would most likely be the yeasty smell of rising bread. There's a look he gets on his face when he walks into the house as rolls or loaves are rising that is akin to nirvana, or at least that's what I assume that look is, as it's the same one I get when I see or even think about tacos or cheesecake. Every other Saturday or so growing up, my mom would make a dozen loaves of bread. This was done not for some artisanal goal, but out of necessity. Homemade ruled in our home, and with a large family, bread was needed. She would pour the flour into her bread bowl, the cream-colored stone one with the pink and blue stripes near the top, and make a well for the other ingredients. Made so often, she never really measured, but mixed and kneaded by look and feel. There on the dining room table, the dough would rise and wait for the next phase of kneading into loaves and placed in the well-used bread pans to sit before each tin had a turn in the oven. The result of this labor was even golden brown loaves that overflowed the sides of the pan, one of which was usually consumed immediately with butter and honey, or, if we were in the right season, homemade peach jam or apple butter. While getting ready for college, I decided to try my hand with the dough and make the weekly bread. My mom was by my side, helping as best she could without the strict guidelines of a recipe, trying to teach her internal intuition to her unsure and very direction-preferred daughter. I would love to say that it was either a complete disaster or utter success, but I honestly don't remember either way. What I do remember is that I started college with 10-cent yard sale bread pans that I never really used. That is, until I did and still do, and a reverence of the beauty of bread. Over the years, I never mastered my mother's bread. I did, however, find a recipe that suited my skill and my tastes, and I found my own rhythm. For many years, I found baking bread completely cathartic, kneading by hand, slowly turning over the flour-covered dough methodically, and working out my mind with each punch and turn. There is something romantic and sacred about making a loaf of bread, something primal, that connects you to generations past and future, as you combine your flour, salt, yeast, and water together, putting your heart and history into your loaf and feeding those you love. Gone are the days of harvesting or foraging wild yeast or sourdough starters that are passed from generation to generation, always the most valuable gift to receive as you set up your own home. However, a few things about bread remain solid, valuable. First, overthinking will lead to overworking, and overworking leads to tough dough and dense bread. It's important to find your own rhythm and light touch. Practice really is the only way to get the feel for the dough. Next, ingredients matter less than you might believe. I've made bread with every type of ingredient. The best bread is the one that gets made. Don't let the fact that you are lacking in what you believe will make the bread over-the-top good stop you. Pull out what you have and go from there. Start simple. And stories matter. Bread matters in a variety of ways. For me, I feel a deep pull of my ancestry every time my bread bowl settles on my counter. The bowl is old and romanticized, and I can feel its history as I mix and work. I have stories filed of my grandmothers and great-aunts, and food going back for generations. I can see my dad's mom in her kitchen, mixing, baking, making, and always serving. I can taste food from my mom's mom, even though it's been decades. Baking bread is storied, heavily storied, in ways both plentiful and absent. But the thing every story has in common is that in each kitchen, those stories had to start somewhere. If that somewhere is you, pull out your bowl and your ingredients and start kneading your very first story, and watch the faces of everyone who smells that yeast-laden dough rising.
There is a love there is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding us. There is a love all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. We rest in this love. We rest in this love.
In my family, particularly my mother's side of the family, I have a bit of a reputation as a roll thief. And it's true, I do love a good dinner roll. Yeasty and buttery and doughy goodness. And I suppose that from time to time, at the occasional family gathering, I may have been guilty of taking more than my fair share of rolls. This is particularly true if we're talking about my Uncle Tom's rolls. My mother was the youngest of 6 children, and she grew up in a small town in the Mississippi Delta, a daughter of sharecroppers. Her siblings were all a good bit older than her, with the closest, Sonny, being 5 years older. Yes, she had a brother we called Sonny. Howard is his given name. Of course, her other siblings were even more outlandish in the names we used as a family. Junior and Biggie, Punky and Billy Jane. I'm not sure what happened by the time my mom came around, but she was always just called Carol. Anyway, on holidays during my childhood, we would travel from the university town in northern Mississippi, where I grew up, along the hilly, pine-forested roads of the center of the state, down into the flatness of the Delta. When we'd arrived around lunchtime, I could smell the yeasty goodness of my Uncle Tom's rolls baking in the oven. My fondness for these delicacies were so well known that my Uncle Sonny would often greet me by declaring to the household, "Hide the rolls, Andrew's here!" I would grin sheepishly, but nod. It's true that I love those rolls, and I guess I liked the love the family showed me through this teasing. My Uncle Tom, Aunt Billy's husband, on the other hand, would greet me with a big hug when I was younger, or a firm handshake as I got older, and say, "Come here, boy," as he led me to the kitchen, where a fresh pan of his rolls were waiting. His eyes would twinkle a bit as he'd gesture for me to take a couple before shooing me back out of the kitchen. I can still hear the peals of laughter as I entered the room with the rest of the family, cheeks stuffed with bread. For a Southern family, we surprisingly represent the gamut of political opinions. I know there are some among the group that are grieving the result of the election, just as there are some of us that are rejoicing. But that never really interfered with the love we shared for each other over those rolls and all the fixings that went with it. The warmth of that shared bread and the togetherness shrunk the world a bit for us to a household of loved ones gathered in one place. It's been years since we've all been together, and some of the family have passed on. This year, holiday gatherings would have been particularly hard since it's the first since my mother's passing. In some ways, I guess I'm grateful that the pandemic lets me keep that grief at bay a bit. But I sure will miss Uncle Tom's rolls. Just try not to laugh too hard if you see me sometime soon with my cheeks stuffed full.
I want to tell you a story about the very simple tortilla and what it taught me in 6th grade during a demonstration speech. In 6th grade, I had a teacher, Miss Kramer, and one of the things I dreaded all year long was going to be the demonstration speech. I didn't know what I could demonstrate. I didn't know what I could do in 10 minutes. It was terrible. So I went into my mother's recipe files and I pulled out a piece of paper with my great-grandmother's handwriting on it for a tortilla recipe. Now, of course, I'd seen her make them 100 times, and I knew I could make them. I knew about the flour and the shortening and the salt and the water and put it together and letting it ball, letting it rest, flap it out. I knew all that stuff. I could do it blindfolded. Perfect story, perfect object, perfect lesson for demonstration speech. So I get to my class in 6th grade. I have got the flour, the water, the shortening. I've got little ones that are already made up because I had to rise. Right, I'm all set. I'm all set up. And I go to the board and I write the word tortilla, T-O-R-T-I-L-L-A, cross both T's, the I. Turn around and say, I want to teach you about how to make a tortilla. And Miss Kramer raises her hands, which of course freaked me out. I'm already nervous enough, and she does this. What's that word on the board? I said, it's tortilla. She said, it's not spelled like tortilla. I said, I don't know what you mean. She's like, there's 2 L's in it. There's tortilla. So now, of course, I'm completely off my game. I'm already freaked out, and now she's challenging me about what I wrote on the board. So I said to her, I picked up the recipe card in my great-grandmother's handwriting, and I was like, this is the recipe card I got it from. This is my great-grandmother's handwriting. This is how she wrote it down. I have no idea why it's spelled the way it's spelled or sound the way it sounds. It was a moment in which I realized once again that being multicultural, that being a blonde Mexican was not a thing people did or people were used to. I didn't really know how to explain to her that a double L in Spanish is a Y. All I knew was I just wanted to get through this demonstration speech and sit down. So the tortilla, which I eventually got through, by the way, and they weren't quite as amazing as this, but what you do is you take your ball after it's risen and you put it in your hand and you do this to make it flat. Right? Back and forth, and you put it in a pan and you fry it. Put it aside. And later, when you want to heat it up, you put it over, my great-grandmother would always put it over an open flame and just do this with it. And I was always amazed she never burned herself once. That was a whole lifetime of making them. What I learned that day is there are assumptions we make in our family, in all our families, things that we just do because our mother, our grandmother, our grandfather did the same thing. We don't realize they're different than what other folks do until you come to a point where someone challenges you. And they say things like, well, that's not how I do it, or how I learned to do it, or you don't look like you should know that. I still love tortillas. I think about Miss Kramer often. And I think about my great-grandmother more, and watching her make them, and watching her and my mother and my grandmother and her sisters making dozens of tamales the day after Thanksgiving. The food of our family is important, holy food. It reminds us of all the stories of all the people that we have loved. And mine is this little tiny thin, unrisen, 9-inch-ish piece of bread that I have served peanut butter jelly, and butter, and tuna. Bread is the stuff of life, and this is the stuff of my life.
I don't make bread for Thanksgiving, and neither did my mother, but my grandmother did. I grew up in St. Albans, a neighborhood in the borough of Queens in New York City. Each Thanksgiving morning, we would get up early and pack the car for a trip to Lewisburg, North Carolina, my father's hometown. It was an all-day trip, and so we celebrated Thanksgiving on Friday. I don't remember the complete menu, but I know we always had light bread. Light bread looks a lot like Parker House rolls, but is a little sweeter, denser, and way more flavorful. I used to marvel at the way Mama shaped the rolls. They came together so perfectly after the second rising. They were all exactly the same size. When baked, they were golden brown on the top and wonderfully fragrant. They pulled apart easily, and sometimes there would be a bready membrane between them, just a little thicker than a spider's web. They were best hot with room temperature country butter that melted into the rolls. The leftover rolls were delicious alone, and also great for sausage or ham sandwiches. Lucky for us, light bread was not reserved for Thanksgiving, but it was a regular part of Sunday dinner. When we were planning this service, Reverend Joe asked me why the rolls were called light bread. I didn't really know, but Google provided an answer which immediately rang true. The terms light bread and light rolls were both used to distinguish yeast bread from cornbread, which was much more common. This was not the cornbread we typically think of today, but a much more basic staple, consisting of cornmeal, hot water, salt, and maybe some bacon grease. According to Google, this recipe is very similar to one used by Native Americans, so perhaps this came from the Tuscarora people in the region. My grandmother made this kind of cornbread when I was a kid. She fried cakes about a half-inch thick in an iron skillet. It was very dense and bland. The only thing that made it palatable to me was covering it with lots of butter and salt. This was definitely everyday food. But my father loved it. He made it for himself sometimes, and used to fondly reminisce about cooking it as a treat for his dog when he was a boy. Of course, back in the 1930s, most dogs ate table scraps, not dog food. I'm a little nostalgic for the old days, especially around this time of year. I still remember the golden perfection of light bread, its slight sweetness and open texture. I remember how hard my grandmother worked to prepare our meals, and how she made my brother and me individual sweet potato pies for the journey back to New York. When I started writing this piece, I thought my nostalgia for the past would lead to regrets about this family tradition dying out. But really, I don't care about making bread. It's 2020, and this is my life. I have no idea what my grandsons will remember when they are my age. Memory is so fickle, latching onto small incidents with a vice grip, compressing decades into broad highlight videos. I don't know what the boys will remember 50 years from now, but I'm pretty sure it won't be my bread.
Today, we've shared stories of one of the most basic foods there are in the world. Every culture has a bread. You've heard about bread from Pat, from me, from Valerie. The world has survived on bread. And we've shared our stories, and it's time for us to close our service. So, as we extinguish our chalice, I'm going to offer you a little wish. May those who gather this week do so carefully and with safety. May those who stay home by themselves not feel so alone. May we remember that this time is short, but bread, like our human community, will live on.
Oh, we give thanks for precious day. we